real privilege and a pleasure for me to be talking to you about focusing, and Eugene Gendlin, who is the person who developed this process. I've been working with this process for about 5 years, and it's really made remarkable changes in my life, which is why I'm so passionate about it. So I want to start, I just want to, maybe you could just wave at me if you've ever heard the name of Eugene Gendlin before this session. Okay, so a few of you, great, but not so many. So I am going to start by telling you a little bit about his work, and then we will go into some exercises, and I'll also share about some aspects of his life. And at the end of the session, I will make some connections between focusing and this process and Judaism as I see it. So Eugene Gendlin was a philosopher, and he was very interested in the implicit. So what is the implicit? So I'd like you to imagine a pregnant lady. Okay, so implicit in the fact that there's a pregnant lady is that there's going to be a baby born. So the baby is implicit in the pregnancy of a mother. So that's just a very brief example. So Eugene Gendlin was studying at the Department of Philosophy at the University of Chicago. And what he found was that the other philosophy students and the professors, they were mostly interested in what we could kind of talk about as a Cartesian world. So that means a world that can be broken down into bits. You know, you break a car down into its component parts. However, Gendlin was interested in this other kind of process, which was not to do with the component parts, but much more to do with a sense of wholeness. So he was wondering where on earth within the university could he continue with his own research and his own interest. So he looked across the campus, and he realized that in the Department of Psychology, he might actually find something that was going to be more interesting for him. And it turns out that the professor of the Department of Psychology was Carl Rogers, who I think many of you will have heard of. In case you haven't, Carl Rogers, he created the person-centered approach to therapy, also used in coaching, also a founding father of positive psychology movement. So Carl Rogers was already very well known at this point, and he was studying therapy patients, because it turned out that people that went into therapy, some of them got better. About 30 to 40% of them would make good progress relatively quickly, and the rest of them, they didn't make a huge amount of progress. And people were even saying, hey, you know, should they even be going into therapy, because they're not going to get anywhere. So Gendlin decided to make his PhD research in this whole subject. And what he found was that the people that were getting better, and it was evident right from the very beginning who was going to get better and who was not going to get better, they were the people who were not getting better. They would stay very much in their thoughts, and they would stay in their mind, and they would stay in their stories. The people who were getting better were doing something very different. So they would be talking about their situation, and every once in a while, they would pause, and they would slow right down, and they would check in. Yeah, well, I don't exactly feel like this. It's more like that. So I have a little example for you. This is the example. There was a woman who was very upset with her sister. And she was talking to the therapist about all the things going on with the sister. And she said, I'm really, really angry with my sister. And she was going on about all the things that the sister had done, the sister hadn't done, that made her so angry. And then she paused and she went right inside. And she said, you know, I'm not angry with my sister. I'm disappointed with her. So I hope you can understand that there's a difference between being angry with somebody and the kind of responses you might get if you express your anger, as opposed to being disappointed. And when you're disappointed with someone, it's perhaps much easier to go to that person and say, hey, you know, this and this happened, and I was expecting you to do that, and you didn't do this and this, or whatever it is. And it opens up a dialogue that isn't really available when you are angry with somebody, because you're so preoccupied with your anger. It's often very difficult for the person to receive someone else's anger. But disappointment is something perhaps a little bit more manageable. So I'd like us to have a little experience now of Eugene Gendlin. He as he went on with this process, he realized that rather than stopping people from having therapy, which was the what other people were suggesting, he's like, no, I want to create a process that helps everybody to have access to this kind of awareness, so that a much wider population can benefit from the therapeutic process. So I want us, before we have, I'm going to guide us into an experience in a few moments. But before we do that, I want to point out that most people have already had an experience of the felt sense, but you may have not been aware of it or had a name for it. So I don't know if any of you have ever experienced a lump in your throat. Maybe you can wave at me if you know what that experience is like. Okay, so a lot of people are waving at me, great. And what about heartbreak? Who's ever experienced heartbreak or heart opening? So these are all examples of a very strong felt sense. Now, the felt sense isn't always as strong as that. Sometimes it's kind of vague, even foggy. And sometimes it might be you think you're making something up. That's actually a sign that there actually might be something going on. It can also kind of blink, you know, like one of those traffic signals that is blinking on and off. You can have that experience, that it's like that. So what I'm going to invite us to do now, I'm going to invite you to think of somebody who you really dislike. Now, it doesn't have to be a person that you know personally. It could be a politician or a character from in public life. So whether it's somebody in the public domain or whether you happen to know people that you find difficult in your personal life. So you might like to close your eyes and feel free to keep your eyes open or closed. And I just want to check, has everybody got a person? Okay. So I want to invite you to imagine that this person is walking towards you in the room, and they're heading over to you, and they want to spend time with you. This person that you really dislike. Let's just take a moment to be with that. And now I'm going to ask you just to kind of put that to the side, let it go, let that person go, whatever it is you need to do to let them go. And I'm going to invite you now to think of somebody who you are very fond of and you really enjoy being around. But for whatever reason, you haven't seen them for a while. And I'm sure, especially with the COVID lockdowns, we all have got a lot of people that we love to see that we haven't been able to see for a while. But it could also be somebody who's passed on. So maybe they don't even live in the same country and you wouldn't be seeing much of them anyway. So I just want to check, has everybody got that kind of a person in mind? Okay, great. And now, again, feel free to close your eyes or to leave them open. And imagine that that person is coming towards you and they want to spend time with you. And just take a moment to see how that feels in your body. Maybe you feel it in your belly or your chest or another part of your body. And see if there are some words that come that can describe this kind of a feeling. And I'm going to invite you to come back into the space, and I'm going to open up the chat. And I'm going to invite you to share your experience. Some of you could put in the chat. So I want to kind of dig in a little bit more and talk a bit more about what the felt sense is all about. I'd like you to imagine the letter A as if a human being is a letter A. So often the beginning of, we keep our awareness and the bar of the A is kind of up here at the neck level. So typically all of our awareness is in our head. But in actual fact, you know, we're a whole person and there's a lot of information that goes on that comes from the body. And in fact, the research shows that there are more signals going from the body to the head than the head from the body. So there's all this information in our body that oftentimes we ignore. And we ignore it at our peril, I want to say. This actually might be a good time to share with you a little bit about Eugene Gendlin's life and how he was impacted actually by his father's capacity to feel into his body during a very difficult time. So Gendlin was born, I think, in 1926, and he was born in Vienna, which obviously in 1938 was taken over by the Nazis. And he was Jewish, so in fact, his father got rounded up by the Nazis. He was in the local jail, and eventually he got released, which they were very lucky that happened. And then I'm not going to go into the full detail of the story because I could easily be talking about it for the whole 50 minutes. At the end of my handout, I put a reference where you can read the whole of the story. But anyway, I am going to share with you this one little aspect. So Gendlin and his family had figured out that their best option for leaving was actually to go via Cologne, because apparently, and they had paid for this so-called safe address. Somebody had given them this address that was supposed to be safe for them. And the idea was that the person at the safe address was going to give them some help to get across the border into Belgium, where the Nazis at that point hadn't invaded. So Gendlin and his father, you know, many difficult circumstances, but they did eventually get to Cologne. They got to the safe address. And Gendlin's father goes in to talk with this person, and Gendlin is waiting outside. After about 10 to 15 minutes, his father comes out and he's ashen, yeah, and he's really worried, and they leave the place. And then his father says, you know, I have a really bad feeling about this. I don't trust this man. So we don't have a solution right now. And Gendlin was really puzzled, you know, that only hope for escape, all their hopes were pinned on this safe address. And now the hopes were dashed. And all because his father had a kind of a feeling about it. So he was very curious about, you know, what kind of a feeling is it that you can trust so much that you know, this one chance of survival isn't it. So Gendlin was interested in the felt sense before he even had words for it. He was 12 at the time that this happened. I'd like to share another story with you, which also informs Gendlin's later work. So eventually, him and his family made it to the United States. They got visas and they were allowed to go to the States. And Gendlin was 12 or 13 at this point, but he didn't speak English. And at that time, they didn't have, special teachers to help us learn a second language and all the rest of it. What they did is they put the kids into classes with younger children so that it would be easier for them to learn the language. So here was Gendlin as a 12-year-old in a class full of 6-year-olds, and he was trying to get his head around English. And as many of us do when we are learning a language, we normally kind of look for the language, the name of the thing in our own language, and then we look for the translation. So in English, okay, so here is the word I know, and then I have to learn it in the new language. The 6th grade teacher said to him, "Hey, Eugene, you don't actually need to know what this is in German." So the example is a chair. Chair is stool. You don't actually need to know that in order to know that in English, the word is chair. So when Gendlin started to look only for the English words, he noticed that there was a kind of a feeling or a rightness to the word chair. It would kind of land and resonate. So Gendlin was really interested in this. And I think this is one of the reasons why later on he became a philosopher and went on to study with Carl Rogers. He created a model which he called the process model. And he talked about kind of our mainstream reality. The model is a unit model. The unit model breaks things down into smaller components. The process model looks at everything as a whole. And that is, I think, one of his major contributions, that we look at the wholeness of things. So, I want to share with you a couple of quotes from Gendlin. So this is him on, this is him on, do you see my screen? Hang on. Share. Okay, do you see my screen? Can somebody wave at me if you see it? Okay, great. So I'm going to read it out for you. A felt sense is not a mental experience, but it's a physical experience. Physical. A bodily awareness of a situation or person or event. An internal aura that encompasses everything you feel and know about the subject at a given time. Encompasses it and communicates it to you all at once, rather than detail by detail. It's a big, round, unclear feeling. And the other quote I want to give you, just to kind of inspire you. We're going to go into another exercise in a minute. It's a felt sense is a promise of a new piece of world. So it's like, it's new information. It's not what you already know. So before we go into the exercise, I just want to go into some of the ways in which focusing is being used. So you can use it if you've got a problem, and he created a whole process for thinking around in a focusing kind of a way. He called it thinking at the edge. Focusing can also give you new insights into any kind of situation, any problem that you're facing, or if you've got an issue with a person. It can really help you to understand things in a new kind of a way. You can use it also to set yourself and to imagine what you want for yourself. So think about a desired future, and then feel into your body how it would be if you get that future. It's an alternative way for interpreting dreams. It's used a lot in coaching and therapy. There's a whole strand of therapy called focusing-oriented therapy. And a lot of people who know focusing are also coaches, like I am, who are using their felt sense to support people. It's not mindfulness, but it's quite close to mindfulness. And for people who struggle with mindfulness, focusing is a really good way to become more aware. It's also good for people who do not struggle with mindfulness. And it's a doorway to spirituality, which we're going to be experiencing now in a minute with another exercise. So before we go into the exercise, I want to give you yeah?
I've got a couple of questions here.
Maybe I can just do this part and then I'll come to the questions. So firstly, when you're aware of the felt sense, you need to turn towards it and acknowledge it, make space for it. And then you're kind of accompanying it as if it's almost like there's a small animal inside you who you're wanting to befriend. And these small animals, they might run away if you're too fast or too quick. So you need to kind of be very gentle and extend compassion to it and really be quiet so that it's got space to express itself. And the acknowledgement that you're aware of it is also a very important part.